Welcome back to the deep dive. We all just sort of take it for granted how the modern world works, don't we?
Oh, completely.
Your GPS gets you to work, satellite weather keeps you out of the rain, global finance is moving at the speed of light, and it all relies on infrastructure orbiting over our heads. But what protects that infrastructure? Today, we're looking up way up at the existential threats we barely even think about. Things like solar flares that could just fry our power grids.
Right. And killer asteroids, as the headlines love to say.
And, maybe most ironically, the growing cloud of space junk that we put there ourselves.
It's a huge pivot, really, in how we think about space. For decades, it was all about utilization. Get up there, set up your satellite, run your business.
They use it.
Exactly. But now we're faced with these three really distinct categories of hazards. And we have to start treating space itself as a critical environment that needs, well, active defense and stewardship.
That's the perfect word for it, stewardship. And our focus today is on the European Space Agency's answer to that. It's their comprehensive shield for the solar system, the Space Safety Program, or S2P.
And many will remember its old name, the Space Situational Awareness Program, or SSA.
Right. But this name change from SSA to S2P, it's not just branding. It feels fundamental.
It is. It's the difference between just passively watching something and actively intervening.
Okay, so what's fascinating here is that the S2P's core mandate goes way beyond just, observation.
Oh, absolutely. It's really a four-step cycle. First, you monitor the hazards. Then you determine the risk, and you do it with high fidelity.
Yeah.
Then you share that critical data with the civil protection authorities, the infrastructure owners, and then, and this is the revolutionary part, wherever possible, you actively mitigate the threat.
That mitigation step is the whole ballgame.
It's everything. That's the new philosophy.
And if you want to see just how seriously ESA and its member states are taking this, you just have to look at the money. I mean, look at the commitment they made at the 2025 Ministerial Council.
The numbers are pretty staggering.
They approved a budget of 955 million euros for S2P for just the next 3 years.
Which is an incredible commitment. And that number, it represents a 30% budget increase over the last funding cycle.
Wow.
And our sources say, and this is the key part, it was actually higher than what the program initially requested.
So they asked for X and got X plus. That never happened.
Never happens. This wasn't a compromise. This was an urgent investment. It tells you that the member states see space safety not as some optional research field, but as an immediate, absolute priority, one that, underpins global security and economic stability.
So they're funding everything.
Every single mission proposal.
Okay, so S2P organizes this huge task around three critical threats, and they call them cornerstones. First, we have monitoring and predicting space weather. Second is planetary defense, so asteroid impact prediction and prevention.
The big one.
And third, the challenge of the orbital environment itself. That's managed by the active debris removal and in-orbit servicing cornerstone, or ADIOS.
So what we're looking at is basically a unified, multi-layered defense strategy. It goes all the way from the sun's plasma emissions, millions of miles away.
Down to tiny bits of paint fleck and metal orbiting right above us.
Exactly. And this deep dive is all about understanding the technical depth and, frankly, the historical necessity of each part of this massive defense system.
All right, let's unpack it. And let's start with the most unpredictable and maybe the most devastating threat. Cornerstone 1, the solar punch. The Cornerstone 1, it's all about the sun. We tend to think of it as this, life-giving, gentle star.
Not so much.
No, it's a violent, unpredictable star that is constantly firing plasma and particles our way. And this isn't just about pretty auroras, is it?
No, this is serious infrastructure defense. The focus here is monitoring the sun's activity, the solar wind, and how all those dynamic interactions affect everything from our atmosphere, the magnetosphere, ionosphere, all of that, to our vital infrastructure, both in space and on the ground.
It's a really complex threat then. It hits us on multiple fronts.
It does. A major coronal mass ejection, a CME, that's a huge burst of plasma and magnetic field from the sun. It can take a few days to get here.
Okay.
But when it arrives, the geomagnetic storm it triggers can induce currents in the ground that literally damage long-distance power grids. pipelines too.
Wow.
And in the ionosphere, those particles scramble radio communications, they degrade GPS signals, and in space, they can charge up satellite components and cause what we call single event upsets.
Which is when the electronics just fail.
They just fail. Or worse, the whole satellite gets fried.
So the goal here isn't just to see the fire, it's to predict where the smoke is going to go and how much damage it's going to do.
That's a great way to put it. And all that processed, actionable data is made available for free and instantly through the Space Weather Service Network.
Okay, that's the delivery system.
That's the utility side, yes. But to get those predictions, you need a whole new generation of surveillance. And that brings us to the most ambitious part of this cornerstone, the Vigil mission.
Vigil. I like the name.
It's Europe's upcoming Deep Space Sentinel. It's planned for launch in 2031.
And the placement of Vigil is what makes it such a game changer for our warning times, right?
Yeah.
It's going to the Sun-Earth Lagrange point L5.
Correct.
So for our listeners, what exactly is L5 and why is that specific spot, that 60-degree angle, so crucial?
Okay, so think of L5 as Earth's rearview mirror. Most of our current space weather observers, like the American satellites, they sit at L1, which is directly between the sun and Earth.
So they're staring right into the sun.
They're staring right at the source, yes.
Yeah.
But L5 is a gravitationally stable point that's 60 degrees behind Earth in its orbit. Now, the sun rotates about once every 27 days.
Right.
By sitting at L5, Vigil can see the active solar regions, the sunspots that are firing off CMEs up to 4 or 5 days before that region rotates to face the Earth.
So that delayed view is everything. If a CME hits us with no warning, we've got, minutes to react, to protect satellites, shut down grids.
Exactly. An L5 vantage point turns that minutes-long warning into a potential 12 to 24 hours of actionable lead time. Depends on how fast the solar material is moving, of course.
But that's a huge difference.
That time is priceless. I mean, power grid operators can do controlled shutdowns, airlines can reroute polar flights, satellite operators can put their spacecraft into safer modes. L5 moves us from just reacting to being strategically prepared.
Which justifies the massive investment in a mission like Vigil.
Completely.
And Vigil isn't alone. It's the centerpiece of a fleet, right? The Distributed Space Weather Sensor System, or D3S.
I do appreciate a good acronym.
Me too. So what makes up this network? How do these Earth-orbiting missions complement what Vigil is seeing from so far away?
So while Vigil gives us that wide-field preemptive view of the sun itself, the D3S missions give us the close-up, localized data. They tell us about the effects of the storm on Earth's immediate environment.
They're like the on-the-ground reporters.
They are. They give us the real-time diagnostics on how well our magnetic shield is holding up.
Okay, so let's look at the missions. First up is Swing, launching in 2027. It's focused on the ionosphere.
Yeah, and Swing is crucial because the ionosphere is where so many of our radio communication problems happen. By monitoring its density and composition in real time, forecasters can predict communication blackouts and GPS errors way more accurately.
Okay, and then we have the Aurora C constellation.
Yeah.
With the first launch planned for 2030, this one's looking at the auroral oval.
That's right. The auroral oval is, the visible sign of solar particles hitting our atmosphere. But its size and location are also proxies for how much magnetic disturbance is going on.
So by watching the whole oval with a constellation of satellites,
Aurora C gives scientists real-time, global diagnostics on the state of the magnetosphere, our planetary shield.
And finally, there's SWORD, planned for 2032. 2 satellites monitoring the radiation belts from a specialized GTO-like orbit. Why that specific orbit? And why are the radiation belts such a big deal?
The radiation belts, or Van Allen belts, are these huge regions of highly energetic trapped particles. During a space weather event, they can swell up dramatically.
And that's bad for satellites passing through.
It's very bad. They get exposed to intense particle fluxes. It can degrade their solar panels, rapidly age their electronics, and increase the risk of those sudden failures we mentioned.
And the orbit, the GTO-like path.
A geosynchronous transfer orbit is highly elliptical. It dips low over the equator and then swings way out from Earth. This path is chosen because it constantly cuts through the most volatile regions of the radiation belt. It provides continuous, targeted measurements that you just can't get from a satellite in a lower circular orbit.
It's a massive leap forward. But like we said, ESA had a strong foundation for all this, didn't they?
They did. The sources remind us that the old Space Situational Awareness Program, the SSA, laid all the groundwork for this between 2009 and 2019.
Right.
The initial space weather segment of the SSA was all about establishing the capability to deliver real-time info. They integrated data from existing assets, like the sun-observing Probe 2 satellite and ground telescopes like the Kanzelho Solar Observatory.
So that initial coordination, which was centralized in
Yep.
Belgium, right? That let them practice forecasting and build the models.
That are now being plugged into this brand new D3S fleet.
So the old program taught them how to sense and forecast, and now S2P is building the custom, dedicated infrastructure that makes the warning truly actionable.
It's a textbook transition from pure research to operational defense.
Yeah.
We're going from just recording that a hazard exists to actively providing a shield against its worst effects, which leads us perfectly into the second cornerstone, an equally catastrophic but entirely different kind of cosmic threat.
The Rogue Rocks. Cornerstone 2, planetary defense. This is the stuff of movies, isn't it? We're talking about preventing mass extinction events here.
Well, yeah, the challenge is immense. Asteroids and comets, these near-Earth objects, or NEOs, they're often small, they're dark compositionally, and they're moving at just staggering velocities.
So finding them before they become an imminent threat requires a systematic, global effort.
You need to cover the whole sky. And you need to find the ones that are currently too dim or too far away to spot easily.
And Europe's effort on this is centralized at the Near-Earth Object Coordination Center, the NEOCC, in Italy.
That's the brain of the operation. It takes observations from telescopes all over Europe, plots the orbits, and calculates those ever-shifting risk probabilities.
And the NEOCC relies on some pretty exciting new hardware, especially the FlyEye network.
The Fly is a brilliant piece of engineering. Unlike a traditional telescope with a narrow field of view, the FlyEye is automated and uses multiple lenses, sort of like a fly's compound eye.
To get a really wide view.
An incredibly wide area of the sky. It allows it to scan the entire sky every single night, looking for new NEOs.
And the sources say the first one achieved first light in Sicily in 2025. That's a huge upgrade from the older systems, right?
Yeah.
The mix of amateur telescopes and the focused OGS telescope that the old SSA program used.
Oh, it's a massive upgrade. The FlyEye network turns detection from a sort of patchwork operation into a systematic industrial process. And that kind of rapid, repeatable sky coverage is essential for finding the smaller, city tiller-sized objects that could sneak up on us.
But this is obviously a global problem. If a threat is found, Europe can't just act alone.
Of course not. And S2P really emphasizes collaboration through groups like the International Asteroid Warning Network, IAWN, and the Space Mission Planning Advisory Group, or SMPAG.
So what's the difference between those two? How do they work together?
Think of IAWN as the data hub. They handle the confirmed information sharing, the technical alerts, the trajectory math.
Okay, they're the ones who say when and where.
Exactly. SMPAG, on the other hand, is the policy and action body. They coordinate the actual impact response. They decide what deflection standards we should use, what technology kinetic impactor or something else would be deployed if a real threat popped up.
So SMPAG is the how we respond, which brings us to the active defense part and the HERA mission.
HERA is probably the most famous mission in this cornerstone. It's the forensic follow-up to a real-world test.
A DART mission.
Right. In September 2022, NASA's DART mission successfully smashed into Dimorphos, the little moonlet of the Didymos asteroid system. It proved that kinetic impact deflection is a viable strategy.
So we know it worked, and HERA, which launched in October 2024, is going to meet up with that system in 2026. What's the point? What forensic data is it collecting?
So DART was the proof of concept. HERA is the deep engineering analysis. We need to know precisely how that momentum was transferred. HERA is going to do a detailed survey of the post-impact Dimorphos. It'll analyze the crater, measure the physical properties of the surface. Was it solid rock or just a loose rubble pile? And crucially, it's going to quantify the momentum enhancement factor.
Oh, what now? The momentum enhancement factor.
Right. So when the DART spacecraft hit, it didn't just transfer its own momentum. The impact blasted a huge amount of material off the surface.
Like a shotgun blast.
Exactly. And that ejecta plume acted like a retro rocket. It gave the asteroid an extra push. That secondary push is the enhancement factor, and it's what made DART so effective. HERA will measure that and give us the hard numbers we need to design future deflection missions against unknown threats.
This is where the long-term planning gets really serious. Beyond HERA, ESA is committing to a whole suite of future missions, starting with the HERA-derived mission, Ramses.
Ramses is launching in 2028, and its target is the infamous asteroid Apophis.
Apophis. That's the one that gave everyone a scare in the early 2000s, right? A small chance of impact in 2029.
That's the one. Later calculations ruled that out, thankfully, but it's still an object of intense interest because of its close approaches.
So Ramsey is going to go study it up close.
Exactly. It'll give us high-fidelity data on its size, its mass, its internal structure, all vital for trajectory modeling. Every piece of data we get on a major NEO helps us predict its path decades in advance.
And then we've got SATIS, a smaller CubeSat mission in 2030. But maybe the biggest leap in detection is NEOMIRE.
NEOMIRE is a true architectural game changer. It's planned for the 2030s, and it's an asteroid-detecting space telescope that will sit at the Sun-Earth Lagrange point L1.
Okay, we talked about L5 being the rearview mirror for solar observation. Why L1 the point directly between Earth and the Sun for asteroids? Isn't it just blinded by solar glare?
That's precisely why it's so crucial. Asteroids that approach Earth often come from the direction of the Sun. From our perspective on Earth, they're completely washed out by the glare.
The ultimate blind spot.
It is, but NEOMIRE uses thermal infrared detection. Asteroids absorb sunlight and then re-radiate it as heat. NEOMIRE's sensors can see that heat, that infrared signature, even when the object is visually lost in the sun's glare. It's designed specifically to find those sneaky, risky asteroids that we currently cannot see.
So we have systematic detection with FlyEye and NEOMIRE, and we've proven kinetic impact with Hera. What's the next step in defense technology?
That brings us to the future of deflection. The Precision Asteroid Nudging mission, scheduled for 2032. This one will test ion beam asteroid deflection.
An ion beam? That sounds delicate compared to smashing a spacecraft into something. How does that work?
The principle is using the momentum from a powerful, high-velocity ion beam, basically a focused stream of ionized propellant, to gently but continuously nudge an asteroid off course.
A tiny continuous force over a long time.
Over months or even years, unlike the kinetic impactor, which is a single massive shove.
And you'd use that for an asteroid that's structurally fragile, a rubble pile.
Exactly. If you hit a loosely bound rubble pile with a dart-like impactor, you might just break it into a dozen smaller, equally dangerous pieces. For those objects, a gentle, sustained nudge is the superior solution. It's the next level of precision, and it shows S2P is building a whole toolbox for this cosmic threat.
That is staggering, the move from just looking up to actively manipulating these objects. Okay, let's pivot now to the threat that is maybe even more urgent, because it's the one we created ourselves. Space debris. Right? This is the active debris removal and in-orbit servicing cornerstone, or AGREOS. And if space is an ecosystem, we have polluted it to a critical degree.
Absolutely. And this cornerstone is all about securing the future sustainability of space. It's about preventing the dreaded Kessler syndrome,
where collisions create more debris, which leads to a cascade of more collisions, until certain orbits are just unusable for generations.
And AGREOS is really the most obvious sign of that shift we talked about, from passive SSA to active S2P. It's an admission that tracking debris isn't enough anymore. We have to start cleaning up.
Like, stop making new junk.
And stop making new junk. The approach is twofold. First, there's the necessary background work of tracking and avoidance. And second, there's the high-risk, high-reward work of active removal.
Okay, so on the tracking side, S2P is still tracking everything from active satellites down to tennis ball-sized junk?
Yes, to predict conjunctions and give operators data for collision avoidance maneuvers. And the old SSA space surveillance and tracking segment built this capability using existing European military and civil radar.
And we should remember the scale of those systems. We're talking about things like the massive Italian Northern Cross radio telescope, the UK's RAF Fylingdale's phased array radar, the French Graves system.
Right. They leveraged all that radar with optical assets like the OLS telescope and the Starbrook network. But the future is all about speed and automation.
Because there's just too much stuff to track manually.
Exactly. S2P is developing a fully automated collision avoidance system. The in-orbit test for that is called CREAM, and it launches in 2028. We're just reaching the point where human operators can't keep up. Automation is essential for space traffic management.
But the really ambitious part of AGREOS is the active removal and servicing, the cleanup crew.
This has been talked about for years, but now we're finally seeing real missions.
Let's start with removal. The flagship mission is ClearSpace 1, launching in 2028.
ClearSpace 1 is pivotal. It's commissioned by ESA, and it will be the first ever mission to actively remove a piece of verified space debris from orbit, in this case, a defunct Vega rocket adapter.
And this mission succeeded an earlier canceled mission called ED Orbit, right? Why did that one get canceled?
ED Orbit was just incredibly complex and expensive. It was trying to develop a single capture system that could handle all kinds of tumbling, non-cooperative, weirdly shaped satellites.
Too ambitious for a first try.
Way too ambitious. Clear Space One narrows the focus. It's targeting a specific known object with a manageable shape. It'll use a set of 4 robotic arms, like a big claw, to grab the object and pull it into a controlled, destructive reentry. It limits the complexity to prove the concept.
A powerful symbol. What comes after that?
We have a race planned for 2030, which will go after a larger defunct satellite. But maybe the most important standardization effort is the Joint ESA Mission CAT, or Capture Payload Bay, also for 2030. CAT is designed to test a standardized docking interface specifically for removing satellites.
That's critical. So the idea is that every future satellite has to have this standard grappling ring or bay built in.
Exactly. Then removal becomes a low-risk docking maneuver, not a high-risk bespoke salvage job every single time. It's prevention built right into the removal system.
And that standardization makes the whole cleanup idea commercially viable.
That's the key. And moving from removal, Adrios also invests heavily in in-orbit servicing, or IOS, which is all about extending the life of valuable operational satellites.
The economic side is sustainability. The demonstration for that is RISE, launching in 2029.
RISE is focused on mission life extension, especially in geostationary orbit. GEO satellites are multi-billion-dollar assets, and their lifespan is often just limited by how much fuel they have.
So RISE will go up and refuel them.
It'll demonstrate that capability, yes. To rendezvous, dock, and refuel, or even repair a satellite, that could add 5 to 10 years to its operational life, which is a massive return on investment.
And then further out, we have Encore and, I love this name, Circular Economy I in 2031.
That term, circular economy, it tells you everything about the philosophical shift. We're moving to a model where components are reused, repaired, or replaced in orbit, instead of just being thrown away.
And this all ties into the broader ESA initiative, Clean Space and Prevention.
Which is where eco-design comes in.
Designing satellites for minimal environmental impact from day one.
Exactly. It's about embedding sustainability into the mission design from the drawing board. Using materials that break up completely on re-entry, including those standardized docking interfaces, designing for modularity so components can be serviced.
And this leads to things like zero-debris technologies, like the EcoStars project.
Planned for 2031, which will test these new design principles in orbit.
But to design for safe re-entry, you need to know what actually happens when a satellite breaks up. Which brings us to the very unique Draco mission, launching in 2027.
Draco is a fascinating mission. It's basically a dedicated observational capsule. It's going to fly alongside a test satellite and specifically monitor it breaking up during an uncontrolled atmospheric re-entry.
It's flying into the fire to collect data.
Literally. Data on fragmentation patterns, heat transfer, how much material actually survives to the ground.
Why don't we have that data already?
It's just incredibly hard to collect from the ground, and no one has ever dedicated a mission solely to watching it happen. Draco's data is crucial for validating all those zero-debris standards. It ensures that when we make rules, those regulations are based on empirical fact, not just theory.
Okay, one last thing for this cornerstone, advanced tracking. The sources mention laser-based tech being tested at the Izania 1 and Izania 2 laser ranging stations on Tenerife.
These stations are absolutely vital. Lasers provide meter-level precision tracking, which you need for accurate collision prediction and for capture missions like Clear Space One.
But they're also testing something else, remote deflection.
Yes, remote deflection of space debris.
So are we talking about using lasers as, like, a weapon to vaporize junk?
Not at all. The goal is not destruction. The physics is much more subtle. You apply laser energy to the surface of the debris for a short time. This causes a tiny amount of material to vaporize. It's called laser ablation.
And that little puff of vapor?
It acts like a micropropellant. It creates a minuscule controlled thrust that alters the object's trajectory just enough to make it safely re-enter the atmosphere or avoid a collision. It's precision control that avoids all the geopolitical risks of actually blowing things up in orbit.
The technical ambition here is just stunning.
Yeah.
So what's the structure that holds all these cornerstones together?
Well, while the cornerstones manage those huge, visible flagship missions, the whole ESA structure also relies on 6 supporting cosmic areas.
And these areas are the engine room.
That's a great way to put it. They manage the smaller, higher-risk missions and provide the underlying services that let the cornerstones succeed.
So Cosmic develops the specialized tech, supports the industrial base, refines the models for asteroid impacts. that sort of thing.
Exactly. They make sure the industrial and technological capacity is there to support the big goals. They might fund research into new materials for a debris capture net or better models for predicting geomagnetic effects on a specific power grid. They're the essential support structure.
Okay, so let's look ahead to the incredible fleet that's being built for the 2030s. We've mentioned the L5 Solar Lookout, Vigil, and the L1 Infrared Asteroid Finder, NEOMAR. What else is on the horizon?
We're seeing missions designed to detect the threats that are basically invisible to us right now. For example, SAILOR, planned for 2030. These satellites will use these giant, delicate solar sail-like foils as super-sensitive impact detectors for sub-centimeter debris.
Sub-centimeters, so debris that's too small for ground radar to track reliably, but it's still moving fast enough to be lethal to a satellite.
Correct. Using the foil to register those hits gives us the vital in situ data we need to accurately model that environment. Without SAILOR, we're essentially just guessing at the density of the smallest but most numerous debris cloud.
And the program's ambition is already pushing beyond Earth orbit. I saw the LEMO demonstrator planned for 2032.
LEMO. That's the Lunar Environment Monitoring Mission. It's for cislunar debris monitoring. As everyone starts heading back to the moon, building things like LunaNet, ESA recognizes that the debris threat isn't just an Earth orbit problem anymore.
They're trying to get ahead of the curve, securing the cislunar frontier before we pollute that too.
Proactively. And finally, back to the sun. We have Vigil as the L5 Scout, but there's also SHIELD planned for the 2030s.
What does SHIELD add?
It's an advanced warning mission for CMEs that complements Vigil. It provides additional, targeted data on the magnetic field structure of the approaching plasma cloud. It just reinforces that core philosophy. Distribute your sensors, analyze the threat in 3 dimensions, and maximize your warning time.
So what is this whole massive S2P structure? The budget, the missions, the ambition. What does it all mean for you, for the listener? The person who relies on their GPS and their cell phone and continuous climate data?
It means that ESA isn't just launching a few scattered science missions. It is systematically building a comprehensive, integrated, multi-layered defense system for our entire digital age.
And that huge budget increase.
That rapid, massive escalation shows that these threats are not future hypotheticals anymore. S2P is the necessary, strategic, technological response to ensure that the foundational space infrastructure that underpins all of modern life remains viable.
That connection between the history and the necessity of it all, that's what's so striking. Hashtag tag outro. If we look back, the transformation from the old SSA program to S2P is just profound. SSA was passive. It was mostly about monitoring and sending out alerts. S2P has transitioned to active intervention. It's monitoring and mitigating, preventing, and now cleaning up. And the fact that the 2025 Ministerial Council gave them more money than they even asked for, it just confirms the urgency.
Absolutely. We've gone through the 3 cornerstones: planetary defense, space weather, and active debris removal. But if you connect all of this to the bigger picture, this program is fundamentally about managing the tragedy of the commons in orbit. It's about ensuring the long-term viability of space exploration and utilization. The question is no longer if we need to act, it's how fast.
Which raises that huge question about the future of space stewardship for everybody, for all nations.
It does. When is monitoring the environment just not enough anymore? When does active intervention, like developing these debris removal technologies we see with Clear Space One, become the required norm for all spacefaring nations?
And how quickly can we get universal standards like eco-design implemented?
Before the debris problem hits that irreversible tipping point, the Kessler syndrome.
And that's the challenge, isn't it? For the next generation of engineers, of policymakers, the future of our access to space might depend less on building faster, cheaper rockets.
And more on how quickly we can achieve a clean and zero space debris future.
The threat is real. And these next few decades of S2P missions will determine if we can avoid it. The security of life on Earth really does depend on the health of the environment just above it.
A critical deep dive into a topic that really it affects every single one of us.
Indeed. Until next time, stay curious and stay informed.
Okay, let's unpack this. We're doing a deep dive into something that Really, it just fundamentally reshaped how the Western world thinks about spirituality.
Absolutely.
We are talking about Theosophy. I mean, it's a religious movement that launched in, of all places, New York City.
Right, back in 1875.
And yet, it insisted its profound truths were being channeled directly from a secret fraternity of spiritual masters hidden away in Tibet.
It is truly one of the most intellectually ambitious movements of the modern era.
No question.
Theosophy is this incredibly complex system, and it was founded primarily by the very influential and often controversial Russian emigre Helena Blavatsky.
And what's so fascinating to me is its structure.
Yes.
You have a movement started in the United States, but it's drawing its deepest philosophy from European Neoplatonism.
And then heavily integrating core concepts from Indian religions.
Hinduism, Buddhism.
Mahayana Buddhism,
Right.
specifically. It was creating what you can only really call a global spiritual synthesis.
I find the whole definition of Theosophy so paradoxical right from the start. That's the intellectual challenge for anyone listening.
It is.
Theosophy insists, flat out, that it is not a religion.
It does.
But then you have, basically every scholar and historian placing it firmly in the category of a new religious movement.
Or occultism or Western esotericism, yes.
So why that resistance to the label religion?
It's a very deliberate and, I have to say, a highly effective rhetorical strategy.
Oh, so.
By subjecting the term religion, they are effectively claiming superiority. They argue that Theosophy isn't about dogma or faith or sectarian rules.
It's something bigger.
Exactly. It's a system designed to illuminate the essential truth that supposedly underlies all religions, all philosophy, even science. They're presenting themselves not as a religion, but as the explanation for all religion.
That's a bold claim.
A huge claim. And allowed them to stand outside the religious competition of the late 19th century. Scholars often just call it Western thought with an Eastern flavor.
That's a perfect shortcut. Western thought wearing Eastern robes.
It's an intellectual structure built in the West, but it's using Eastern vocabulary and cosmology.
And the name itself, Theosophy. It has this intellectual weight to it, right? It grounds them in history.
Absolutely. Blavatsky didn't just invent the word. The term Theosophy is ancient Greek.
From Theos and Sophia.
Right. Theos for God and Sophia for wisdom. So divine wisdom or God wisdom.
And it's an old concept.
Incredibly old. You see it used by early Christian church fathers. And then it got its more esoteric meaning during the Renaissance with mystics like the German shoemaker Jakob Böhme.
So when Blavatsky and her colleagues adopted this name in 1875, they were very deliberately connecting their new movement to this long-established tradition of mystical knowledge.
Exactly. I mean, the founding trio Blavatsky, Henry Olcott, and William Quan Judge, they debated other names. The Rosicrucian Society, the Egyptological Society.
The Theosophical Society had that ring of ancient authority.
It did. Though to be clear, when we talk about Blavatsky's specific doctrines, like the root races, we're talking about modern theosophy.
And despite the sheer complexity we're about to get into, 7 planes of existence, cosmic cycles, there's this incredible simplicity at the organizational level.
There is.
The Theosophical Society has just one required belief for its members.
And this was probably the single smartest organizational move Blavatsky made. It guaranteed its international viability.
So what is it?
The only required tenet is a commitment to form a nucleus of the universal brotherhood of humanity without distinction of race, creed, sex, caste, or color.
Universal brotherhood. That's it.
That's the entire formal requirement. And because the system claims to be the truth behind all religions, that one commitment allows for amazing flexibility.
You don't have to give up your own faith.
Not at all. A person could be a devout Hindu, a practicing Christian, a lifelong Buddhist, and still be a card-carrying theosophist.
That umbrella structure must have been so appealing back then.
Profoundly appealing, especially to a middle and upper class audience who felt, spiritually adrift from traditional churches.
Okay, that really sets the stage for our mission here. We're going to explore the secretive masters who gave Blavatsky this doctrine, then get into that bizarre cosmic history.
With the lost continents and evolutionary giants.
And then track its chaotic but hugely influential legacy in 20th century culture from art to politics.
Quite a story.
Let's get into the mechanics of the society's founding, because it's really the origin story for the doctrine itself.
It is.
The Theosophical Society starts in New York City, 1875, Blavatsky, Olcott, Judge. But they realized pretty quickly that their spiritual center wasn't in America.
Correct. The American Foundation was just the staging ground. In the early 1880s, Blavatsky and Olcott made the critical decision to move the society's world headquarters
To India.
to Adyar near Madras in Tamil Nadu, India. And this physical move was totally consistent with their philosophical claim.
That the oldest, deepest wisdom was in the East.
Specifically in India and Tibet. Olcott, in particular, became deeply involved in Asian cultural revival, encouraging pride in Hindu and Buddhist traditions that had been, marginalized under colonial rule.
And this geographical shift points us directly to Blavatsky's claim to authority.
It does.
She wasn't just synthesizing ideas from books. She claimed she was taking dictation from living, breathing spiritual entities.
Precisely. Blavatsky insisted that the vast, detailed cosmologies in her big works, Isis Unveiled and the Mass of the Secret Doctrine, were not her own.
They were revelations.
Received from a secret brotherhood of spiritual adepts, highly evolved individuals she called the Masters, or Mahatmas.
And for Theosophists, these Mahatmas are the ultimate source of knowledge.
They're the true unseen founders of the modern movement.
The whole idea of a hidden brotherhood sounds a bit like, standard occult fiction, but she gave them really specific, almost biographical details.
She did. They are defined as a fraternity of highly evolved human men.
Men, specifically.
Yes. And crucially, they are not ascended spirits or gods. They are men who have achieved such profound moral and intellectual attainment through countless reincarnations that they've reached a state of superhuman evolution.
And they're based in Tibet.
Primarily, yes. Blavatsky claimed their main base was nestled deep within the Himalayas.
And this evolution gave them powers that would seem, supernatural to us.
That's right. Through years of intense esoteric training, they had mastered control over matter and energy.
So what could they do?
Their powers included having exceptionally long lifespans, full clairvoyance, the ability to see things beyond normal sight, and maybe most sensationally, the power to project their soul.
Their astral body.
Exactly, to project their astral body instantaneously to any location on the planet. They were the keepers of humanity's ancient spiritual knowledge.
The Great White Brotherhood.
Or the White Lodge, yes. They are actively guiding humanity's slower generational evolution.
It sounds almost like a spiritual intelligence agency, working behind the scenes. And Blavatsky even named her contacts.
Oh yes. The two most famous figures in all of theosophical literature are Masters Kuthumi, or Kuthumi, and Maurya.
And she claimed to be in constant contact with them.
She did. And to prove their existence, especially to a skeptical West, she facilitated the delivery of the famous Mahatma letters.
The letters that just appear.
Yes, these were missives with spiritual instruction that allegedly materialized spontaneously. They'd fall from the ceiling or appear inside locked boxes as proof of their supernatural intervention.
That's a very powerful narrative tool, physical proof of a hidden authority. Did Theosophists actually have a picture of these figures in their heads?
Yes, and this is where the Masters became truly concrete figures. In 1884, a German artist, Hermann Schmeeken, created portraits of Maurya and Kuthumi.
And these became important.
Intensely important. Scholars say they achieved semi-canonical status. They weren't just generic spiritual figures anymore. They were specific, recognizable individuals, two wise-looking, bearded men in robes who represented the ultimate goal of theosophical aspiration.
So if the Masters are the pinnacle of evolution, what's the path for the average Theosophist to try and, climb that ladder?
It's an extremely rigorous path. For those deemed spiritually worthy, they might be approached for an apprenticeship called celliship.
A celliship?
Yes, and it's a years-long period of intense probation and testing. It requires absolute dedication to physical purity and self-denial.
What does that entail?
The applicant has to remain strictly chaste, abstinent from all intoxicants, and cultivate complete indifference to any physical luxury or comfort. It's basically an ascetic life for the modern intellectual.
And the knowledge they're all trying to preserve, what is it?
It is the ancient wisdom religion, or the secret doctrine. Blavatsky claimed this single unified truth is the essential basis of all world religions.
So Plato, the sages of India, the Egyptian mystery traditions.
She claimed they all possessed a knowledge that seamlessly united science and religion, and that their understanding far exceeded the fragmented knowledge of the late 19th century. The Masters are the caretakers of this unified theory of everything.
So Theosophy isn't just another spiritual option. It's positioned as the ultimate historical culmination.
Absolutely. Theosophists believe this ancient religion, now being revived through the society, will eventually spread globally. They see it as the final, universal truth They will naturally eclipse and replace all existing dominant world religions,
Christianity, Islam.
even the current forms of Buddhism and Hinduism, because it claims to reveal the hidden mechanism behind them all. I mean, it's a claim of truly immense scale.
Claiming to supersede all other faiths requires an incredibly detailed explanation of the universe itself.
It does.
Let's get into the cosmic stakes and the, frankly, dizzying cosmology that Blavatsky laid out, starting with the nature of the divine.
Okay, so the Theosophical system starts with a concept borrowed heavily from Neoplatonism and Hinduism.
Yeah.
It's a monist position.
Monist, meaning one single reality.
One single absolute divine reality. The absolute.
Mm-hmm.
And the universe as we perceive it is not created from nothing. It's explained through an emanationist cosmology.
Yeah.
Everything we see is just a successive outward reflection from this one absolute.
Which means our material world isn't, well, it isn't fundamentally real in the same way.
Correct. The material world, the reality our senses experience, is considered Maya or illusory.
An illusion.
It's a temporary, distorted reflection of the absolute. It's necessary for our spiritual evolution, but ultimately it's a grand delusion.
So if the whole cosmos is an emanation, how does this divine energy organize itself into a functioning planetary system? How is our world built?
This is where the architecture becomes incredibly complex. Every solar system is seen as the expression of a divine mind, what Blavatsky called the logos, or solar deity.
And below that?
Below this logos, you have a hierarchy of 7 great beings, or planetary spirits, each one controlling the evolution on a specific planet or sphere.
And the planets themselves are multidimensional, the famous planetary chains.
Yes, this is crucial because it explains cosmic time and evolution. Blavatsky said that each planet, including Earth, has a 7-fold constitution, a planetary chain.
But these aren't 7 separate planets flying through space.
No, not at all. They are 7 globes or spheres of existence, coexisting in the same space, but vibrating at different frequencies.
So when we look at Earth, we're only seeing the densest, slowest vibrating part of a 7-part entity.
Exactly. And the evolutionary process is cyclical and sequential across this chain. Life, or the monadic wave, moves from globe A down to the various stages, mineral, vegetable, animal, human, until it reaches globe D,
Which is our physical Earth.
our physical Earth. Then it proceeds to refine itself upward through globes E, F, and G. This process takes immense periods of time and is repeated across 7 great rounds.
It's an almost industrial scale of spiritual progression, and this progression directly gives rise to the 7 root races, one of the most controversial aspects of the whole doctrine.
Yes. The concept of the 7 root races, each divided into 7 sub-races, is the application of that cosmic cycle to human history on our globe, globe D. This is where Theosophy provides a full alternate history.
Okay, take us through the timeline of these root races.
The first 3 races were non-physical or semi-ethereal. The first was pure spirit, living on the imperishable sacred land. The second, the Hyperboreans, lived near the North Pole.
And the third?
The third race begins to develop physical form. They lived on the lost continent of Lemuria, which allegedly survives in vestiges like Australia and Easter Island. They were early, hermaphroditic, giant-like creatures.
So then we move to the 4th root race, the famous Atlanteans.
The Atlanteans. They represent the physical peak of the first half of human evolution. They inhabited the lost continent of Atlantis.
And they had fully physical bodies.
Yes, with distinct sexes. But they still retained powerful psychic abilities and highly advanced technology. Blavatsky taught that some Atlanteans were literal giants who built ancient megalithic monuments like Stonehenge.
Now we get to the detail that causes people to just stop and question the whole narrative. The fall of Atlantis.
The narrative takes a very dark turn here. The Atlanteans were advanced, but they were morally decadent. They abused their powers.
And the most cited detail is pretty shocking.
It is. It's Blavatsky's assertion that some Atlanteans began to mate with she-animals.
Wait, mate with animals?
Yes. And this resulted in a huge karmic transgression and, specifically, led to the biological creation of the great apes, gorillas, and chimpanzees.
So the creation of modern primates is explained as the result of cross-species mating by a decadent race on a lost continent.
It is the ultimate mythological device. It explains the origin of these life forms and serves as a moral warning about misusing power.
And because of this moral failure, Atlantis sank.
It was destroyed in a global catastrophe. But survivors, the morally purer subraces, fled and formed the seed societies for later races in places like ancient Egypt and the Americas.
So if that was the end of the 4th race, where are we now?
We are currently in the 5th root race, which Blavatsky called the Aryans. This race, she said, is found globally and is focused on developing the intellect, or manas.
Our current developmental goal.
Right. This fifth race will eventually be replaced by the sixth, which will be heralded by the arrival of the Buddhist messianic figure Maitreya. And then finally, the seventh root race, which completes the current planetary cycle.
That is a staggering vision of history. And it brings up a crucial question for anyone learning this. How do we, in a modern scientific context, reconcile any of this?
And that's where we return to the framework of myth. A scholar named Gary Lachman suggested we miss the point if we try to read this as literal history.
So what's his take?
He proposed that the secret doctrine is best read as Blavatsky's audacious attempt to formulate a new myth for the modern age. In essence, it functions as a huge, fantastic science fiction story.
Designed not to convey facts, but to provide a cohesive narrative framework for spiritual progress.
Exactly. It's the ultimate spiritual epic.
Okay, let's zoom in. How does the individual human soul navigate this massive evolutionary system?
The individual human is the focus of the whole system. The purpose of life is spiritual emancipation, uniting the lower material self with the higher self.
The divine spark within.
Right. And the human being isn't just a body and soul. It's seen as a sevenfold entity.
7 components. That's way more layered than the traditional Western concept. Can you break those down?
They operate across 3 planes. On the lower physical plane, you have the body and vitality. On the next plane is the astral body and the animal soul, which is where our passions and desires live.
And the immortal parts?
The higher triad is immortal. That's the human soul, which is the mind and ego. Then the spiritual soul, which is intuition. And finally, the spirit, or Atma, the direct spark of the divine.
So the goal is to merge your mind and ego with that higher triad.
To achieve union with the inner God. Blavatsky described this journey as moving through 3 halls. You start in the hall of ignorance, which is being stuck in the illusion of Maya.
Then you move to
the hall of learning, where you gain knowledge but can get distracted by psychic powers. The highest goal is the hall of wisdom, where you achieve that true union. And beyond that is the veil of bliss, where the soul finally merges back into the one absolute.
To reach that goal, you'd need multiple lifetimes.
You would.
Which brings us to reincarnation and karma concepts. Theosophy was so instrumental in popularizing in the West.
Absolutely. Theosophy asserts the human spirit is immortal and must be repeatedly reborn into new human bodies.
Human bodies only.
Yes. Crucially, they insisted you don't get reborn as an animal or a plant. And this whole cycle is strictly regulated by karma.
Karma as the cosmic scale of justice. How did Blavatsky define it?
As the absolute inexorable law of consequence. Your actions, your thoughts, in one life inevitably affect the circumstances of the next.
So it provides the logical explanation for suffering.
Exactly. It's just payment for misdeeds in a prior existence. Interestingly, she taught that karma only came into being when humans developed egos and individualized consciousness.
When moral choice became possible.
Right.
And what happens in between these incarnations? Where does the soul wait?
After physical death, the lower 4 principles dissipate. The astral body survives for a time in a state called kamaloka.
Which is like limbo.
A kind of spiritual limbo, or purgatory. After that, the higher principles, the immortal triad, enter devachan.
Which is their version of heaven.
It's equated to heaven or paradise, but it's not permanent. It's a long dream state where the soul experiences the fulfillment of all its highest aspirations. It's a spiritual reward, a rest, before karma pulls it back down for a new incarnation.
How long a rest?
Blavatsky initially said it could last anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 years, so a massive gulf between lives.
That vast timeline really shows how far removed the system is from traditional Western ideas of the afterlife. It's organized, ambitious, and comprehensive.
It is.
Which makes the next phase of the history so jarring. Once Blavatsky dies, all that high organization just descends into scandal and infighting.
It does, almost immediately.
Blavatsky died in 1891, and the chaos nearly tore the whole society apart.
It was a leadership vacuum.
Yeah.
And it pitted the 3 major successors, Henry Olcott, William Quan Judge, and Andy Besant, against each other.
And it was all about the masters.
It centered entirely on the mechanism of authority. If the masters were the true source, then whoever could prove they were still in contact with them held the right to lead.
And William Quan Judge, who led the American section, claimed he was still in contact.
He did. He claimed continued, direct communication, even producing new messages they had allegedly sent him.
And Olcott, who was the president, didn't buy it.
He was highly skeptical. And that suspicion escalated into outright accusations of forgery against Judge.
So we have this ultimate spiritual turf war where the authenticity of the divine source is brought into basically a courtroom inquiry.
And Besant initially sided with Olcott, leading to a formal internal inquiry against Judge in 1893.
But the verdict was bizarre.
It was. The inquiry concluded that Judge was not guilty of forgery.
How is that possible?
Because the Theosophical Society had always maintained that it takes no official position on whether the masters exist or not.
So they couldn't condemn him for forging letters from beings they wouldn't officially say existed?
Exactly. It was a brilliant defense of the master's privacy, but it was disastrous for the organization's stability.
And this messy internal fight was leaked.
It was. A journalist got hold of the details, and the whole affair became a highly critical book. Ultimately, the American section, led by Judge, just seceded in 1895, forming the Theosophical Society in America.
Shattering the unified structure.
Completely.
The international body in Adyar eventually stabilized under Annie Besant, and this is the period that critics call Neo-Theosophy.
Yes, because Besant and her key associate, Charles Webster Leadbeater, began to push the doctrine in new, more messianic directions.
This is when they announced the imminent return of the world teacher.
Exactly. They dramatically expanded on Blavatsky's teaching about Lord Maitreya. They claimed that Maitreya had incarnated throughout history as Krishna and that he had spiritually entered Jesus at his baptism.
And that he would now return as the culminating messianic figure.
The Christ, as they began calling him.
And then, in 1909, they announced they had found the physical vessel for this divine return. That must have sent shockwaves through the organization.
It absolutely did. Leadbeater was walking on a beach at Adyar when he encountered a young Indian boy named Jiddu Krishnamurti.
And he identified him on the spot.
Immediately. As the chosen vehicle, the vessel for the manifestation of Maitreya, the world teacher, the society went all in on this boy.
Grooming him, educating him, promoting him globally.
They founded the Order of the Star in the East specifically to herald his arrival.
That intense focus on a single messiah must have created massive internal tension.
It caused an explosion of both growth and backlash. The Adyar Society's membership peaked in the late 1920s, over 40,000 members.
But it alienated the old guard.
Many foundational theosophists, yes. They accused Besant and Leadbeater of creating a new dogmatic religion, and they pejoratively labeled it Neo-Theosophy.
And there were other controversies too, right?
Oh, yes. Leadbeater introduced ritualistic elements, which led to the formation of the liberal Catholic Church.
And that church had its own major scandal.
It did. In 1919, the church was embroiled in police investigations over serious allegations that 6 of its priests had engaged in acts of pedophilia. It was overwhelming.
It sounds like the movement was simultaneously soaring on this messianic promise and crashing under the weight of scandal.
That tension was the defining feature of the era. And it all led to a resistance movement, rallying under the banner of Back to Blavatsky.
And the final dramatic repudiation came from the world teacher himself.
In 1929, in a truly incredible act, Jiddu Krishnamurti publicly insisted he was not the world teacher. He dissolved the Order of the Star and rejected the entire framework.
What was the reasoning?
He said that truth is a pathless land, and no organized religion or group can lead you to it.
That must have been a devastating blow.
It was. The Adyar Society lost 1/3 of its membership. The dream just collapsed.
It's astounding that a movement that suffered such huge public humiliations, schisms, scandals, repudiation, managed not just to survive, but to profoundly influence the entire 20th century.
Its concepts just permeated the cultural atmosphere. It became, unintentionally, a spiritual grandfather to vast modern movements, starting with high culture. Theosophy was absolutely crucial for the pioneers of abstract art.
I find this connection incredible. The idea that this invisible world of masters and astral bodies inspired the rejection of figurative painting.
It's a direct link. Take Helma of Klint. Her development of abstraction was intimately tied to her work in the Theosophical Society. Her goal was to translate these non-physical spiritual concepts into visual language.
She was literally painting the invisible architecture of the universe.
As revealed by Blavatsky, yes, and she wasn't alone. Wassily Kandinsky, a foundational figure of abstract expressionism, was deeply invested in these ideas.
And Piet Mondrian as well.
Also influenced by theosophical symbolism and cosmic geometry. This movement gave artists the intellectual permission to reject the physical world for the spiritual.
And beyond art, it also had a tangible effect on politics and social change.
A massive, often overlooked role in encouraging cultural pride in South Asia. Take Mahatma Gandhi. He developed his interest in the Hindu classic, the Bhagavad Gita, only after two Theosophists introduced him to it.
And Annie Besant herself became a major political figure in India?
A relentless social and political reformer. She championed Indian home rule, women's rights, education. She was even elected president of the Indian National Congress.
Let's pivot to its enduring spiritual legacy in the West. You called it a grandfather movement.
Because its ideas are so pervasive now, they feel like they've always been here. Scholars estimate theosophical ideas have inspired over 100 esoteric groups.
Like Rudolf Steiner's Anthroposophy.
He was a leader in the German section of the Theosophical Society before he split to found his own movement, taking much of the underlying structure with him.
And it popularized concepts that are now just mainstream in the New Age movement.
Massively. Theosophy was the main vehicle for introducing and popularizing concepts like reincarnation to a wide, educated Western audience.
And the human aura and the chakras.
Right. In 2012, the human aura got 47 million Google hits. The chakras, 12 million. These ideas are now common parlance in wellness and alternative spirituality, and they were formalized and spread by Blavatsky and her successors.
And finally, the concept of the masters evolved beyond the Theosophical Society itself.
The idea persisted, evolving into the Ascended Masters. This framework became central to later groups, like Alice Bailey's Arcane School and the IMM group. Even in pop culture, the White Lodge in the TV series Twin Peaks is a direct borrowing from theosophical terminology.
We started this deep dive with a paradox, a movement that rejected being a religion but offered this massive spiritual synthesis, guided by hidden Himalayan masters. We went through 7 root races, the sinking of Atlantis, the bizarre origin of gorillas.
Then tracked the dramatic collapse of its structure through schisms and scandals.
Only to see its core concepts explode across 20th century art, politics, and the very vocabulary of modern esoteric thought.
The ultimate success of Theosophy is really in its design as a hybrid religion. It took complex Western intellectual traditions and seamlessly blended them with accessible Asian concepts like karma and reincarnation.
It was an alternative for people who wanted spiritual depth without the dogma.
Exactly. It was designed to be a religion for the thinking classes.
So what does this all mean for you as you think about the origins of modern spirituality? We detailed Blavatsky's vast cosmogony giants building Stonehenge and the creation of primates through cross-species mating on Atlantis.
Given these highly fantastical, often bizarre elements, we have to consider that suggestion from the scholar Gary Lachman.
Right. That perhaps the lasting significance of the Secret Doctrine is not as a literal history book, but as Blavatsky's massive, audacious attempt to formulate a new myth for the modern age.
Which raises the final provocative question for you.
When you encounter modern concepts of the New Age, your chakras, your aura, your karma, how much of that widely accepted spiritual understanding is built on foundational ideas that were initially designed and disseminated as a colossal, fantastic science fiction story? The deep dive continues in your own search for the hidden truth.
Okay, let's unpack this. When you hear the words Fort Knox, what's the first thing that pops into your head?
Oh, it's gold. It's always gold. A giant vault, probably some James Bond movie scene with lasers and massive steel doors.
Exactly. You picture this impenetrable fortress just floor to ceiling with gold bricks. It's this legendary symbol of high security.
Right, the ultimate heist location. But that image, which, has been built up for decades by Hollywood and pop culture, it completely overshadows what Fort Knox actually is.
It really does. And the reality is so much more vast. We have sources here showing that the real Fort Knox is, well, it's not really the vault. It's a massive 109,000-acre United States Army installation.
With a history that is just incredibly complex and surprising, and it goes so far beyond gold reserves.
Right. So our mission today is to kind of separate that myth from the metal. We're going to peel back those layers and really get into the installation's true, evolving legacy.
We're going to explore its journey from a contested Civil War outpost all the way to becoming the global center of armored warfare, and then to what it is today, which is something completely different. It's really a story about how an institution goes from protecting hardware, tanks and gold, to developing the Army's most critical resource, its people.
Okay, so let's start right there with the gold vault. If Fort Knox is this huge Army base, Why does everyone on the planet automatically think of that one building full of bullion?
Well, it's because the media has basically conflated two totally separate things that just, happen to be next door neighbors.
Huh.
And this is really the critical distinction. Fort Knox is the name of the military base, the Army installation. The building with all the gold is called the United States Bullion Depository.
The bullion depository.
And it's not even run by the military. It's operated by the U.S. Department of the Treasury. It's just a heavily fortified building that happens to sit adjacent to the Army post.
So the Army base is the neighborhood, and the depository is the super secretive rich neighbor with the crazy security system.
That is a perfect way to put it. And that treasury operation is just massive. I mean, we're talking about over half the country's official gold reserves stored in one place.
Wow.
And the location wasn't an accident. It was built by the Treasury back in 1936, and the land they built it on was actually transferred to them from the Army post.
So the Army literally gave the Treasury a super secure piece of its own real estate.
Exactly. It gave them a protective buffer right from the get-go.
That timing, 1936, that's fascinating. It's the middle of the Great Depression. The government is centralizing its wealth. I mean, maybe the vault is one thing, but how on earth did they get all that gold there?
It was a monumental undertaking. And, while the Mint Police handle the internal security today, getting the gold there in the first place required the full might of the Army next door.
They needed a military escort.
A huge one. Our sources confirm that when those first shipments started moving in 1937, they were moving almost 13,000 metric tons of gold.
13,000 metric tons. I can't even picture that.
It's a staggering amount. And these shipments were escorted by the combat cars of the 1st U.S. Cavalry Regiment. And crucially, they had just been mechanized. So you have to imagine this scene. Convoys of armored cars and heavily guarded trains all converging on this one remote spot in Kentucky.
That just brings us to maybe the most surprising thing I found in our sources. The fact that the vault hasn't always just held gold. It had this other secret role during World War II.
This is where the story gets really incredible. It transcends finance and touches the very heart of American identity. After Pearl Harbor in 1941, there was, a very real panic, a fear of attack, even on the East Coast.
Right, where all our national archives were.
Exactly. So military planners realized they needed a place that was inland, obscure, and absolutely positively impenetrable to protect the literal symbols of American democracy.
And they chose the gold vault. You telling me they put the actual original copies of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution in there?
That's correct. The Declaration of Independence, the Constitution of the United States, and even Lincoln's handwritten draft of the Gettysburg Address.
Unbelievable. So they're in there, next to the gold.
Yep. And it wasn't just about security from bombs. The vault had perfect environmental controls. The temperature, the humidity. It was the ideal place to preserve that fragile climate. It became the ultimate safe room for American heritage.
So they weren't just protecting the nation's wealth. They were protecting its memory. How long did those documents stay hidden away?
They were in there until September 19th, 1944. And that date is really important.
Why that date specifically?
It was about 3 months after the D-Day landings. Once the Allies had a secure foothold in Normandy and the war in Europe was clearly turning, the perceived threat to the U.S. mainland dropped way down.
So only when victory seemed certain did they feel it was safe to bring the country's birth certificates back home to Washington.
Precisely. It really shows how the vault, and by extension the military posts surrounding it, served as the ultimate guarantor of continuity for the American government during its darkest hour.
Okay, so let's shift gears now to the Army installation itself. The 109,000 acres of Fort Knox that existed long before the vault was even an idea.
Right, because this land has deep, deep military roots. It goes all the way back to the Civil War.
Kentucky was a critical border state, so I imagine this area near the Ohio River was pretty strategic.
Hugely strategic. The site's military history really kicks off in 1861 with the construction of fortifications called Fort Duffield. It was up on a high point overlooking the spot where the Salt and Ohio rivers meet.
A key transportation hub.
Absolutely. If you controlled that spot, you controlled the supply routes, the troop movements, everything. And the area was fiercely contested. Union troops held the forts, but they were under constant threat from Confederate cavalry and guerrilla units.
Like John Hunt Morgan.
Exactly like John Hunt Morgan. He and his 2nd Kentucky Cavalry raided this region constantly before he launched his famous, incredibly audacious raid across Indiana and Ohio. So, yeah, this land has a long history of being fought over.
So after the Civil War, I imagine things quieted down until the Army needed it again in the 20th century.
They did. For decades, it was pretty quiet. But then World War I happened, and the Army desperately needed massive training sites for field artillery. So in 1918, they started leasing about 20,000 acres near a little village called Stifton.
And that became the camp we know today.
That was the beginning. They named it Camp Knox in honor of Henry Knox,
George Washington's chief of artillery and the country's first Secretary of War. That's a pretty fitting name, considering what the post would eventually become.
It is, but its future wasn't secure at all. After World War I, military budgets were slashed. The building just stopped. And for this short, kind of bizarre period from 1925 to 1928, it was actually designated Camp Henry Knox National Forest.
Wait, a national forest? You're kidding.
I'm not. It just shows you how uncertain things were. The designation was like a holding pattern, a way to keep the land under federal control until the military needed it again.
Which, as we know, happened pretty quickly in the 1930s. And this is where it gets really interesting, because this semi-forested training ground turns into the global epicenter of mechanized warfare.
The change started small. In 1931, a small mechanized cavalry unit was assigned there to basically experiment with replacing horses with engines. And that experiment was so successful that in January 1932, the temporary camp was made a permanent garrison and officially renamed Fort Knox.
And then the mechanized cavalry arrived in force.
They did. The 1st Cavalry Regiment showed up and traded in its horses for armored cars and light tanks. By 1936, Fort Knox was the center for developing all new mechanization tactics and doctrine for the entire U.S. Army. The future of land warfare was being written right there in Kentucky.
But it was the start of World War II that really poured rocket fuel on that fire.
Oh, absolutely. The speed and terror of the German blitzkrieg in Europe sent shockwaves through the U.S. military. In July 1940, the Army created the new Armored Force, and its headquarters was put right at Fort Knox. The guys already there, the 7th Cavalry Brigade, were instantly converted into the famous 1st Armored Division.
So Fort Knox became tank mecca.
For 60 years, the U.S. Army Armor Center and School was established there. This is where generations of tank crews were trained, from the Shermans of World War II all the way up to the M1 Abrams tanks that dominated in the late 20th century.
The scale of that wartime buildup must have been incredible.
It was immense. By 1943, the post was a sprawling military city with almost 4,000 buildings on over 100,000 acres. It even had its own airfield, Godman Army Airfield, for training air support. It was a self-sustaining powerhouse.
And that legacy of mobility and armored command is still there today, right?
Yeah.
In the museum.
It is. The General George Patton Museum of Leadership. It celebrates the whole history of the cavalry and armored forces, with a big focus on Patton, of course. It's this constant physical reminder of the post's identity for most of the 20th century.
Before we move on, you mentioned a really fascinating little experiment right after the war in 1947.
Yes, the Universal Military Training Experimental Unit. After WWII, there was this huge debate about whether the U.S. should have mandatory military training for all young men.
So Fort Knox was chosen as the showcase for this idea.
Exactly. They ran a 6-month project to show the public that this training could be holistic. It wasn't just about marching and shooting. They really emphasized physical, mental, and even spiritual well-being.
Spiritual well-being. In a military training context, what did that even look like?
Well, it meant a heavy focus on character development, ethics, civic responsibility, things far beyond basic field training. They were trying to show that military training could build better citizens, not just soldiers.
And did it work?
The experiment itself was considered a success, but Congress ultimately rejected the mandatory training proposal. It was just too expensive and politically complicated. But the fact that Fort Knox was the laboratory for this major national debate just shows how central it was to the American military identity. So that 60-year legacy of armor, of tanks, of Patton that defined Fort Knox for generations. But the post-9/11 world and massive military reorganizations brought some really radical changes.
Right, the Great Shift. The Base Realignment and Closure Process, or BRA. It's still so weird to think of Fort Knox without tanks.
That era officially came to a close in 2011. The U.S. Army Armor School moved to Fort Benning, Georgia, to merge with the infantry school. It was a massive, controversial move. And for Fort Knox, it meant losing the very identity it had held for decades.
But what filled that huge vacuum? I mean, the Army wasn't just going to abandon a 109,000-acre installation right next to all that gold.
No, far from it. Fort Knox transformed. It shifted from being this, kinetic, hardware-focused base to a massive human capital management hub. One of the first big moves was reactivating V-Corps there in October 2020.
And V-Corps is a big deal, right?
A very big deal. It was one of our main combat corps in Europe during the Cold War. Reactivating it at Fort Knox shows the Army's renewed focus on large-scale operations, especially in Europe, so it's still a vital operational post.
But the biggest change, the thing that defines it now, is the arrival of the Human Resources Center of Excellence, HRC.
It absolutely is. Starting in 2009, the Army's Human Resources Command began relocating to Fort Knox from the D.C. area, and this required the single largest construction project in the entire history of the post.
To house administration, not armor.
Correct. They built this enormous $185 million complex. It's 880,000 square feet, 6 interconnected buildings. When it opened, the Human Resource Center of Excellence became the largest office building in the entire state of Kentucky.
That is just a wild fact. The biggest office building in Kentucky is on an Army base, famous for gold. But I have to ask, does the military really need an office building that big for HR?
Well, that was the big debate. The argument for it was synergy. Before this, you had dozens of different personnel offices scattered all over the place. HRC brought them all under one roof. They handle everything from officer promotions and assignments to retirements and casualty affairs for the entire Army.
So it's basically the global HR department for a workforce of over 1 million people. The logistics just shifted from tank parts to people.
You got it. And the center is named the Timothy Maud Center of Excellence, honoring the highest-ranking military member killed on 9/11. So it directly connects that mission of taking care of people to the sacrifices of the modern era.
And beyond the HR hub, Fort Knox is still a major training center, just for a different kind of soldier.
That's its other critical mission. Since 2014, the U.S. Army Cadet Command has been headquartered there, so now all the summer training for thousands of ROTC cadets, the Army's future officers, takes place at Fort Knox. It's a leadership factory now.
So what other units are there today?
It's still a busy place. You have the U.S. Army Recruiting Command, 1st Army Division East, the 1st Sustainment Command, plus a ton of Army Reserve units. It's all focused on support, sustainment, and leadership now, not tank gunnery.
Let's talk about the community itself. What does the demographic data tell us about life on this new Fort Knox?
Well, the data shows the impact of that great shift pretty starkly. In 2000, when the Armor School was going full tilt, the population was over 12,000. By 2020, it had dropped to about 7,700.
Wow, so losing the tanks meant a net loss of people, even with HRC moving in.
It did. But the people who were there, I mean, the demographics are pure military family. In 2000, something like 77% of households had kids under 18. The population is incredibly young.
And I saw the gender ratio from back then was really skewed.
Oh, it was extremely unbalanced. Something like 155 males for every 100 females. I'm sure the HRC, with more civilian and administrative roles, has balanced that out a bit, but it's still very much a young, active military community. They even have their own school system on post, run by the Department of Defense.
Before we wrap up, we do have to touch on a more sobering part of the post's modern history, the internal security threats.
Right. It's this stark contrast. The post is designed to be impenetrable from the outside, but we've seen these tragic vulnerabilities from within. The worst was in 1993, when a worker named Arthur Hill killed 3 people at the Training Support Center.
And our sources said his coworkers had raised concerns about him beforehand.
They'd expressed fear of him. It was a tragedy that really highlighted some major gaps in how the military was handling mental health and internal threat assessment at the time.
And then it happened again more recently.
It did. In 2013, a civilian employee was shot and killed in a parking lot. A U.S. Army sergeant was convicted for it. It just underscores that even in the most secure places on Earth, the human element is always the biggest variable. #JustTagOutro.
This has been such a fascinating deep dive. We started with that classic image, the gold vault.
Yeah.
And then we learned it's not even run by the Army. It's just the Treasury's very secure neighbor.
Right. And the real Fort Knox, this huge installation, has this incredible history, from a Civil War battleground to the place where they tested ideas about universal military training.
And of course, for 60 years, it was the undisputed center of the armored warfare universe, the place where American tank doctrine was literally invented and perfected.
And all that infrastructure, everything built to support those tank armies, that's what laid the groundwork for its modern transformation.
A transformation where the rumble of tanks has been replaced by the administrative hum of the largest office building in Kentucky, the Human Resources Center of Excellence. And now it's the home base for training all the Army's future officers.
It's really incredible. The mission has fundamentally shifted from protecting physical assets, tanks, gold, to developing human capital.
And what's so fascinating is how that core purpose is still about logistics. But the asset being managed has completely changed.
It has. You could argue the physical security that was needed for the gold vault back in the 30s is what created the stable, secure environment that allows these massive, people-focused organizations to thrive there today. The legacy shifted from protecting the might of the army to managing the people in the army.
Which brings up a final, really interesting question for our listeners to think about. Given that long, powerful history as the home of mechanized warfare, and the fact that the General George Patton Museum is still standing right there on the grounds, what does that legacy teach the thousands of cadets and HR specialists training there today?
That's the fascinating duality, isn't it? They walk past this monument to aggressive, kinetic, mobility-focused leadership every single day. But their mission now is all about personnel management, recruitment, and readiness, things that require a much more nuanced strategic approach. So do those future leaders find a way to apply Patton's lessons of decisiveness to the complex world of human resources? Or are those two missions, raw combat power and bureaucratic efficiency, now fundamentally at odds? It's that tension between Fort Knox's past and its present that is just so compelling to think about.